the love they shared. For those who knew them personally, Oat Pasicorn and Boat Yongyat were not just another couple. They were a symbol of what love could look like when it was lived out loud, without apology. Together, they represented something both ordinary and extraordinary at once. Two men who found home in each other, who built a life together despite the quiet prejudices that still trailed same-sex couples in parts of Thailand. A meeting written in fate. Oat and Boat's paths first crossed in Bangkok, through mutual friends at a casual gathering. Oat, with his boyish charm and infectious laugh, had a way of making even strangers feel like lifelong companions. Boat, by contrast, was quieter at first, reserved, careful with his words, but sharp-eyed and steady. What began as small talk quickly turned into something magnetic. Boat later admitted that he had noticed Oat's energy before even speaking to him, like he was pulling the room toward him, he once said. Oat, on the other hand, would joke that Boat's seriousness was what made him curious. I had to know what was going on behind those eyes. From that night onward, their connection only deepened. It wasn't always dramatic or cinematic. It was built on the steady weaving together of lives, sharing meals, showing up for each other's families, learning each other's flaws, and still choosing to stay. A bond that felt like family. Thailand, while more open than many Asian countries to LGBTQ+ relationships, still has its unspoken lines, questions from relatives about marriage, inheritance, what the neighbors might say. Oat and Boat were aware of these pressures, but they navigated them with a quiet courage. Boat was the planner, the one who thought about bills, long-term savings, and the routines of daily life. Oat, ever the dreamer, often balanced this with lightness, planning spontaneous trips, bringing home small surprises, or simply making Boat laugh after a long day. Friends describe them as yin and yang, opposites in temperament, but inseparable in practice. When asked about their relationship, Oat once said, "I don't need anything grand. I just need to wake up and see Boat beside me. That's my stability." Boat, less effusive with words, expressed it differently. "I know Oat's habits like I know my own heartbeat. That's love. You stop being separate people." The public and the private. Though neither man sought celebrity, their lives weren't entirely private either. Social media became a window through which friends, acquaintances, and distant admirers could glimpse their relationship. Photos of shared meals, matching outfits on holidays, or quiet selfies on the couch painted a picture of intimacy and warmth. To outsiders, it was enviable, a relationship full of laughter, mutual respect, and longevity. To those close to them, it was real. They argued, they made up, they carried each other through exhaustion, financial pressures, and the invisible weight of judgment. They weren't perfect, one friend admitted, but they fought for each other every single day. That's what made their love stand out. Everyday life. Their lifestyle wasn't extravagant. Oat worked long hours, while Boat often managed household responsibilities. Weekends were for family visits or catching up with friends. Evenings, more often than not, were spent side by side on the couch, sometimes in conversation, sometimes just in silence, the comfort of presence enough. They loved driving together at night, windows down, city lights flickering by, music filling the car. For Oat it was freedom, for Boat it was trust. In those drives, they often felt most themselves. Two men, in love, carving their own space in a world that didn't always understand. A love that spoke volumes. What made Oat and Boat remarkable wasn't grand gestures but the way they inhabited each other's lives so fully. They were known to friends as the couple who would arrive at parties together and leave together, who always checked in on one another even in group settings. Their love spoke in small things. Oat making sure Boat ate when he was too busy. Boat quietly fixing things around the house before Oat even noticed they were broken. Shared looks across crowded rooms that said more than words ever could. It was, as one friend described, the kind of love that makes you believe in forever. Yet behind all the smiles and quiet tenderness, no one could have predicted how suddenly that forever would be tested. Because on one fateful night, the routines they had built, the love they had nurtured, and the bond that had become unshakable would be thrown into chaos. A single moment, a single choice, would lead to the accident that changed everything. And in the days that followed, the world would not only grieve Oat Passacorn but also turn its gaze sharply toward Boat Yongyet, questioning his role, his choices, and his pain. The night of the accident. The night of the accident began like so many others in their life together. Ordinary, unremarkable, even a little rushed. But tragedy has a cruel way of hiding in the folds of normalcy, waiting for the moment no one expects. The evening out. That Saturday had been filled with movement. Oat had been working long hours during the week and was looking forward to unwinding. Boat, who often leaned more toward staying in, had been persuaded to join him for a dinner with friends. They drove out together, Oat humming along to the radio as Boat watched the streets blur past. At the restaurant, laughter flowed easily. Friends later recalled how Oat was the life of the table, cracking jokes, nudging Boat to loosen up. Boat smiled quietly, sipping his drink, occasionally rolling his eyes at Oat's antics but never straying far from his side. They looked happy, one friend remembered. Just normal. Like every other couple there. But there were hints too, small, almost invisible, that the night might turn differently. Oat had a few glasses of alcohol, enough that Boat noticed but not enough, at least to him, to sound alarms. When Boat asked softly if he was sure about driving home, Oat brushed it off with his usual reassurance. "I'm fine. Don't worry so much." Boat did worry, but fatigue, trust, and the desire to avoid conflict made him let the moment pass. The drive home. They left the gathering later than intended. The city was alive with neon lights and late-night traffic. Oat took the driver's seat, adjusting the mirrors as Boat slid in beside him. The air was cool, and for a while the car was filled only with music and the low hum of tires against asphalt. To Boat, these nighttime drives had always been comforting. He leaned his head against the window, letting the rhythm of the ride soothe him. Oat tapped the steering wheel to the beat of the song, occasionally reaching over to brush Boat's hand, a quiet gesture, almost apologetic after the long silence between them earlier that week. Then came the turn. The one everyone would later talk about. The moments before. The road ahead wasn't unfamiliar, but that night it carried danger none of them could see. Witnesses later said the street was slick, the glare of headlights sharp against the dark. Another car entered the intersection too quickly, and in the chaos of seconds, lives were rewritten. Boat would later recall the moment in fragments. The sudden blare of a horn. Oat's sharp intake of breath. The screech of tires fighting asphalt. And then, the violent impact. The world turned inside out. Metal crumpled like paper, glass exploded, and the force threw Boat sideways, his head snapping against the seatbelt. The silence after. When Boat opened his eyes, the world was a haze of smoke, headlights, and sirens in the distance. His ears rang, his hands were trembling, but his mind snapped to one thing. Oat? Oat! He turned, heart lurching. Oat was slumped over the steering wheel, blood streaking down his face, his body frighteningly still. Boat's chest tightened as he reached out, shaking him. "No, no, no, stay with me. Please, baby, stay with me. Don't do this to me." A passerby was already calling for help, their voice frantic. Another rushed forward to open the passenger side, pulling Boat out as he fought against them, desperate to stay with Oat. "I can't leave him. That's my husband, let me stay." Boat screamed, his voice raw, tears blinding his vision. But Oat wasn't responding. His breaths were shallow, uneven. Each second felt like eternity. The emergency response. The ambulance arrived quickly, though for Boat it felt unbearably late. Red and blue lights bathed the wreckage in harsh color as paramedics swarmed. They worked with precision but urgency, cutting through the mangled door, stabilizing Oat, strapping him onto a stretcher. Boat, dazed and bleeding from minor cuts, stumbled after them. "Is he going to be okay? Please, tell me he's okay." No one answered him directly. That silence was worse than any words. He was held back as Oat was loaded into the ambulance, but the look on the paramedics' faces told Boat everything he didn't want to know. This was critical. This was life and death. The ride to the hospital. Boat wasn't allowed into the first ambulance. He followed in another vehicle, clutching his hands together so tightly his knuckles turned white. His mind spun in circles, replaying the night, second-guessing every choice. Why didn't I drive? Why didn't I insist? Why didn't I fight harder? The city blurred past in streaks of neon, but Boat barely saw it. All he could picture was Oat's face, laughing hours ago, broken now. By the time they reached the hospital, Boat was already a shell of himself, fear hollowing him out. Oat was rushed into emergency care, disappearing behind swinging doors, leaving Boat stranded in a waiting room full of sterile lights and suffocating silence. That night, what began as an ordinary evening between two men who loved each other ended in chaos, blood, and unanswered questions. By dawn, Oat Passicorn's condition would be declared critical. And for Boat Yongyet, the hours that followed would be the longest and most punishing of his life. Because the accident wasn't just a crash. It was the beginning of a storm of grief, blame, and scrutiny that neither of them could have imagined.